Hello, everybody. Edre here, and for anybody new here, I make casual reviews, and it's just my opinion, so take everything I say with a massive, massive grain of salt. But today, I'm going to be reviewing the brand new album from Hayley Williams of Paramore fame, Flowers for Vases. This is the follow-up to her LP, which came out last year, Petals for Armor, an album which I honestly did not really like too much. I could take it or leave it. I was relatively disappointed with it. I felt that there was many things that just in my opinion didn't go good with that album, from the rollout beforehand where most of the album was already released to just the overall sound of the album. I thought that in general there was a lot of flaws and it was an extremely flawed album, and I personally never understood the hype. So when I heard that Hayley Williams was already following it up with a brand new album, to say the least, I was relatively concerned because I was hoping that, she would improve upon all the flaws of the last one, but it's not been that long. Well, let me just get right into this. There's a lot to talk about here. Musically, this album, Flowers for Vases, has a lot of sonic similarities to Petals for Armor, but in many ways it has much more acoustic instrumentation and really goes down a much more acoustic route than the previous album. The first track is one of the most acoustic tracks on here, First Thing to Do, and it sounds much more personal and much more unique than really anything on the last album. So going into this, I was sort of impressed by a song that I thought was one of Hayley Williams' best. So for the most part, I started this album relatively positive. Overall, I enjoyed the track, I enjoyed her delivery, so, yeah. And this theme would appear throughout this album. I seemingly did enjoy the acoustic tracks much more, and what I mean by acoustic is the much more acoustic tracks, the tracks that are primarily fully acoustic tracks. I think overall, they just turned out to be a little bit better. Well, not every single one is magnificent or excellent. For example, like the song Estoli, I thought was a really pretty sounding one, a really nicely arranged acoustic track, but, it didn't leave the biggest impact in my opinion. That being said, relatively good. One of the highlights on this album, perhaps my favorite song on this album, is Good Grief. It has a very Elliott Smith-esque vibe to it. I like Elliott Smith quite a bit, so that is a huge plus. And I think it is also worth noting that the song Keep You Right Here has a bit of a chamber pop sound to it. The much more piano-based instrumental on there just was a nice little change-up that I thought really spiced this album up just enough to give it an extra flair that was missing on Petals for Armor. In fact, that song, Keep You Right Here, sort of reminds me a little bit of Josh Klinghoffer's Plural One project, which is an album that I thought was like the second best album, which came out last year. And the other track that was a standout to me was Just the Lover. I thought it was a pretty good way to close off this album. It was a nice little calm, relaxing piano send-off. That being said, this has been a very positive review up until this point, and unfortunately there was quite a few duds on here as well. The track My Limb is there's just something about her delivery and her vocal melody on this track that kind of just kills the vibe, and it comes across a little corny to my ears. Though I enjoyed the arrangement, I thought that part of the song was good. The actual melody behind this track just didn't leave much of an impact for me. Trigger is another one that sounds like it could have been, probably my least favorite on here. It feels like it could have been an outtake from Taylor Swift's Folklore, an album that I thought was relatively bland. It also sounds like the more accessible, less interesting, counterpart to Phoebe Bridgers' Garden Song, a song that I love quite a bit, but without the edge. And, in general, there's an overall complaint I have about this album is just there's a lot of odd melody choices throughout here. I don't hate the arrangements all throughout, but I think there's a lot of odd choices in the vocal melodies and the leads overall. Songs like Over Those Hills have off-putting guitar leads that really, in my opinion, sort of kill the vibe of the song. And finally, the lyrics and the delivery are pretty standard for Hayley Williams. I don't think they didn't blow me away, but they definitely, in my opinion, were a major step up from Petals for Armor. There was a lot less cringeworthy moments than there were on Petals for Armor in terms of the lyrics, and while her delivery was kind of so-so on some tracks, for the most part, it was relatively consistent. Now, at the end of the day, overall, I didn't necessarily mind the more new wave direction on Petals for Armor, and I really did kind of hope that she would continue to build upon that sound and maybe make it even better, because Paramore had experimented with that sound before, so had Hayley Williams. But this album did kind of go in a new direction. It was not, well, it did have some similarities. It was, like I said, a much more acoustic-driven album, and I didn't dislike it. I thought for the most part, it was a much more well-focused, much more well-centered album than Petals for Armor was, and I do think that there was just genuinely a lot of good acoustic work on here. Now, while there was a fair amount of filler tracks, in my opinion, and a lot of tracks that I do think are relatively forgettable, it was just generally, I feel like the focus was there. It was generally well focused, and I got general enjoyment from it. Like I said, I didn't love this thing. I thought that there was a lot of moments on it that I wasn't crazy about. But compared to Petals for Armor, I was much more pleased with this album. I thought this is definitely the sound of Hayley Williams moving in the right direction. So at the end of the day, I have settled on giving Hayley Williams Flowers for Vases, blooming 6 out of 10. For anybody new here, you guys need to know, anything above a 5 is good, anything below a 5 is negative. So a 6 is a positive review. It's above average. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, but I liked it more than I disliked it. So that's why I gave it a 6. Decent. Definitely Hayley Williams moving in the right direction as I hoped for, which is really pleasing. I don't see myself constantly returning to this because unfortunately there wasn't so many standout tracks. But overall, it was a well put together album, and I am glad to hear Hayley Williams really start to get a little better with the solo stuff because I was disappointed with Petals for Armor. That being said, goodbye.